Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Whatever time of day you're tuning in, we're glad that you're here. Welcome to the Martel Group Fireside Chat, your monthly dose of real talk at the intersection of sales and marketing. Each month, we sit down with a leading industry expert to explore fresh perspectives, hard-earned insights, and emerging trends, all through the lens of sales and marketing strategy. You can have the sharpest minds in the room, the ultimate product, and the funding to back it all up. But without an effective strategy to get that product into the world, you're more than likely to fall flat. That's where today's guest, Jason, comes in. As the founder and CEO of Game Changer Communications, Jason knows a thing or two about creating the perfect marketing strategies. Have a listen.
Most executives that I've run across in the business world, and most funders of businesses, and most people that are concerned with overall success of businesses are focused on two main things regarding a business. The first is their product or service, or their suite of capabilities. And their second is their balance sheet or their overall financial profile, right? There's a third leg of the stool that I've seen be just even more essential and critical and even more of a determinant to ultimate success. And I define that as strategic communication. I have literally been in companies and seen great disruptive products and overall profitability not lead to the desired end result.
Now there's a lot to unpack here with Jason, so without further ado, sit back, relax, and let's dive right into it. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Martel Group Fireside Chats. I am your host, Chris Davis, and I am so glad that you are back here listening again to another episode. We have another fun and special guest here today. Interesting story, actually came from a referral from one of our previous podcast guests. So we're kind of growing this web and this like interconnected circle of marketing and sales leaders that are in the industry here. So without further ado, I want to introduce Jason Sprenger. He is the founder and CEO of Game Changer Communications, a marketing expert, and I am super excited to talk to him. But before we start diving in to all of the weeds here, Jason, welcome. How are you doing today?
Hey, great. Thank you for having me. Excited for the chat.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's a lot that we can kind of get into. There's a lot that kind of falls under the umbrella of marketing, communications, things of that nature, and especially how we kind of tie things into sales, right? How everything just kind of weaves itself together and kind of the importance behind what you do. But before we jump into all of that, would you mind just giving us a quick background on you, who you are, maybe a little bit about Game Changer as well, just so we know who we're getting to hear from today?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a born and raised Minnesotan. I still live in the Twin Cities and traveled all over, but I've never lived anywhere else. So this is home for me. I have been in public relations, or I prefer the term strategic communications now for my entire career. I have a journalism degree from the University of Minnesota. Go Gophers!
Yeah, there we go.
Go Gophers! And I've been doing this for a long time. So I have experience in agencies. I also worked inside two companies, building and running a department, and Game Changers going on 13 years old as well. So I've been on my own theoretically for more than half my career now, which is kind of wild to think about. So that's a little bit about me. Personally, I'm married. I got two kids and two stepkids. So my oldest child is graduating high school this weekend.
Wow.
So
Congratulations.
Got a lot going on the home front right now. But it's fun, and we're new seasons in life, and we're all just kind of rolling with it. So Game Changer in a very small nutshell is a full service strategic communications agency. Again, been about 13 years going now. And in that time, we've had 70 plus clients, most of them B2B, but still some B2C, but within the B2B world, mostly high tech, professional services, manufacturing, a bunch of different kinds of things. So really, we specialize in helping small to medium sized B2B organizations really find their voice and then build their businesses holistically.
Yeah.
using again the entire spectrum of Stratcom.
That's a pretty long journey, and I appreciate you kind of setting up the foundation there. And again, congratulations to your oldest. That's super exciting. As a fellow dad, I have a long way to go before my kids even get to high school. But I know that time moves pretty quickly. Especially when you've got
You'll be
kids.
gone before you know it. Enjoy
Yeah,
it while you can.
that's
Yep.
exactly right. Curious about the start of Game Changers, right? You said you started it about 10, or excuse me, 12, 13 years ago or so. Before or kind of after you had already worked in a couple of other positions within the same field, had you always had the intention of starting your own, organization aimed at these things, or was it like kind of like an aha moment where you just woke up one day and you're like, this is what I want to do? Like, where did the foundation of that start from?
It's a great question. I am not a born entrepreneur. I find that there are kind of two kinds of people that start their own businesses. There's people on the one side that have grown up around startups or around other entrepreneurs, and that's just kind of what they know. And there are people like me who just find their way into it. And
Yeah.
I'm definitely in the latter. Even for the first half of my career, there were a lot of people that would I'd be out to coffee or whatever with them, and they'd, hey Jason, I think you should do this someday.
Hmm.
I think you should start your own shop, and of course it's a flattering compliment, and I always accepted it as such, but I never really gave a whole lot of credence to it or real weight. And then I found myself laid off from my second corporate job, which is still the last job I had before I hung my shingle. And I was out there freelancing and did really well. I actually made more freelancing than I did in the previous job. But I still, even at that point, was still not really all in on Game Changer. But then I went to coffee one morning with a guy who would become a client,
Hmm.
and he said it. He just said the words that a lot of other people had said, like you should start your own firm. And that one morning, I don't know what it was, but I don't know if it was a coffee I drank or what I ate for breakfast that morning or what, but I saw the light.
Hmm.
I heard the angels sing. Like I had that epiphany moment that people sometimes have. And I'm not kidding you when I saw things differently that in that conversation. And really truly I haven't looked back since. It's been a wild roller coaster ride, but that was the morning that I'm like, yeah, I got to do this. And within 2 months I had formed the business and entered the market, and within a month after that I was full of new clients.
Wow.
And yeah, I'm blessed beyond belief that I got full of business within a month. And so it started really strong, and here we are still.
That's a crazy story, and I'm sure that like the acceleration of things was just kind of like an opportunity for you to almost learn as you go, right? Or you were just like, you must have had a really good vanilla latte that morning to just like hit it hard and say, all right, this is what I'm doing, and then look at your life a month later, thinking, oh gosh, like here we are, like we're doing this, and this is real, right?
Yeah, and of course, starting a business is you can't just turn around and do it, right?
Right.
There's all sorts of things that have to be thought through and done and accomplished, and it's kind of a step-by-step process. And kind of the last step in that process, if you're doing it right, is client acquisition, right?
Hmm.
You have to think about what your name is going to be and what your website's going to be look like, and what your bank accounts are going to look, who you're going to have
Right.
as a tax advisor. There's just so many things that you never think about until you're actually in that situation. Um, and that's really, I've learned a lot about running a business in the last
Yeah.
12, 13 years, but I'm still learning, right?
Sure.
And again, I think even people who are born entrepreneurs still don't have it all figured out, but they maybe have some more resources around them to help them learn quickly. I haven't had that. So I've been building my network and building my knowledge base as I've been going, which, there's been mistakes and
Sure.
inefficiencies along the way, I'm sure of it. And but here I am. Like I think I'm still around because I've done something right over the years. And so
Yeah.
hopefully I'm doing things better than I have been, and hopefully Game Changer continues to grow and evolve, and hopefully in 5 to 10 years from now, even the business is in a whole different place.
Yeah. Well, look, just like you said, clearly you're doing something right, and I tip my hat to the fact that you've been doing this for 12 or 13 years now, like, and you've been able to help sustain that and whatnot. Now, I want to ask the cliche question just to kind of get it out of the way. Is when you got started and the 12 or 13 years that you've been doing this, what's been like the one I guess I don't mean it, as a pun here, as a dad joke, but what's been the one like game changing piece of advice or like thing that you think that you've stuck to throughout the years that has either helped you get to the next level or that's like a core value of how you've been operating over the past number of years?
I could answer that question 20 different ways. I think there's a lot to it.
Sure.
I in terms of a core value, really what ranks really high for me is integrity. I want to be a person first and foremost that people want to work with
Hmm.
and would call just for advice if they need something, regardless of whether or not we ever work together. And that goes for all of you listeners out there. Like, if there's ever anything I can do for you, truly, I am happy to roll up my sleeves and figure out what it is I can help you with.
Hmm.
And I'm interested in building relationships with people that are mutually beneficial.
Yeah.
And I want to do that the right way, or what I think is the right way, which is again investing in others and investing in community and being just a straight up no nonsense, tell it like it is person. And my clients will even tell you, like, I do what's best for them regardless of what the consequences of that are. And I've made decisions over the years that cost me money, but it was
Yeah.
better for my clients. And so that's what I proposed. That's what we went with. And I think that that's part of maybe why I've been able to have such good long-term loyal clients over the years, and why my word of mouth, people, I get a lot of referrals, and I think it's because people know that what they get from me is the straight truth, and what they see is what they get. And I'm not gonna, when I make a mistake, I'm going to take responsibility for it, and I'm just going to do the very, very best I can every day for the people I work around.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really easy as you're in a business of any kind to waver from that and to maybe take the easy way, or to make a buck here, or to whatever it is. But I think it takes guts to stick to what you think is right, and to take care of people first, and to play the long game. And I've again, maybe it's cost me over the years here and there, but that's just the way that I believe in doing things. And um, I've never wavered from that, and I would absolutely, double down on that I'd tell anybody else that, like, that's just super important. I think I've learned a lot about how to build and scale a business,
Hmm.
and there you can get so far by relying on your network and mining your own network. But in order to scale a business, you really have to go hunt as well as garden.
Yeah.
And hunting is something that definitely does not come natural to me.
Hmm.
But it's something that I hope in the last 9 to 12 months, I've gotten better at. And hopefully Game Changer will continue to grow and scale because of it. Um, I mean, get really good advisors around you,
Yeah.
people you trust. That's not just people to be your coach and people to be your own sound personal advisory board, but a good tax accountant and a good lawyer, and if you're in a business big enough, a good banker,
Hmm.
and just other key people that that you'll be able to rely on, and who will tell you the straight truth when you need to hear it. It's really important. Even if you have to pay good money for that stuff, it's still well worth it. I could go on and on, but those are just a few of the things that have stuck out to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love the analogy of, gardening versus hunting. I don't know. It's been a while since I've heard that, very rarely used, but I think that's also very true. Right. And it's one of those things. And I've talked to other guests here on the podcast where it's like, if you're not good at something, right, if there's a skill that you're lacking, like try to align yourself with somebody who is good at that. So you guys can all be like
Yeah.
individual pieces of the larger puzzle. Right. And I think
Yeah.
that type of sound advice is huge. Now, I want to dig into what you do and what Game Changer does and kind of the significance of why what you do is important, because there's so many different things that we could dive into. But I want to start with just like a very quick definition, just to kind of set the arrow straight, if you will. Is, if somebody walks up to you off the street, has no idea about what you do, has no idea about marketing or communications or sales or anything like that, what's like the very quick elevator pitch on how you define the importance of what you do?
Yeah, so depending on the conversation that precedes the question, I might take it a couple different ways,
Okay.
right? So number one, just in terms of the value I bring to businesses. So literally, quite literally, I build and I create and accelerate value for businesses
Okay.
using strategic communications, which again, a lot of people don't see the connection there. So that's where, again, I can kind of take it from there. But um, for some people, I would say, all right, Game Changers, a full service strategic communications agency, and then they'll wonder what that is. And
Mm-hmm.
but I'd really try to lead with value, because everybody needs more of that. and
Sure.
um, and the conversations almost always these days are about, I'm having this pain point and how do I navigate? So I think you're alluding to, kind of where does the need come from?
Mm-hmm.
And the need just it comes from, taking it back a step. Most executives that I've run across in the business world, and most funders of businesses, and most people that are concerned with overall success of businesses are focused on two main things regarding a business. The first is their product or service, or their suite of capabilities, and their second is their balance sheet or their overall financial profile,
Sure.
right? So as a startup founder or as an investor is evaluating success for a company, or they're looking at the big picture and determining overall health or likelihood to get somewhere to that next stage of that big life cycle, those are the two things that they tend to focus on.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm here to tell you that neither of those two are, they're both important, don't get me wrong. But there's a third leg of the stool that I've seen be just even more essential and critical and even more of a determinant to ultimate success. And I define that as strategic communication. I have literally been in companies and seen great disruptive products and overall profitability not lead to the desired end result.
Mm.
I have been on the opposite, where companies have had kind of, they've been figuring it out, but they knew to bring me in, and they knew that they needed to think differently about how to go to market. And we were able to build them a strategic program that I've literally created billions in dollars of value for my clients over 13 years.
Wow.
So I'm very, very passionate about that. And I know that it works because I've done it lots of times. And so it starts there, right? It starts with defining what value is and what success looks like, and where a company is trying to go as a company, not at all with what they think of that they might need to attack from a communications perspective.
Yeah.
And let's face it, every day, all the time, I run up against people out there. And I'm not a big fan of the term public relations anymore.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
there's a reason for that, right? It's because that I have an idea of what that is, and so does everybody else out there. And the two, my idea of it and their idea of it almost are never the same.
Hmm.
It's very 1 in 100, if that, when the two are aligned. And we could. I'm literally writing a book about this, about the dichotomy and how this has to
Okay.
evolve. More to come on that later. But I I want to have strategic discussions with my clients and with anybody in business about what's possible with communication. And I want to tie that back to the highest level business objectives and goals and metrics that count against those. I don't just want to do vanity metric stuff for vanity metrics
Hmm.
sake. I want to build businesses. So I think strategic communications is a good way of doing that, and I think that by tapping into all of the various elements of it in whatever way makes the most sense for a particular organization at a particular time, that's how we get them there quickest and most efficiently.
Yeah. Out of the, whether it's companies that you already work with or companies that you see and you're kind of just wondering like, hey, what the heck are we doing here? Like, as you put on your, kind of communications hat and you're sitting and evaluating companies who maybe either have a strategy, they have a very loose strategy, a very poor strategy, if that's the take. What do you think is kind of like a common thing that most companies are getting wrong, or that they're approaching differently, where you can sit there and look at it and say, if you do this, it's instantly going to 180 the direction that your company's moving?
From a high level strategic direction, so there's obviously tactical things here and there that I could always punch up. But at a higher level, there's two main things that I'd point to. The first is message.
Hmm.
Um, Over 25 years doing this, I've gotten a pretty good idea of what a certain target audience or a certain targeted buyer is going to want to see from a company, right?
Hmm.
And what value props and what sorts of things work best, B2C or B2B. And most companies don't do a very good job of are very clearly articulating the value they bring to a specific audience,
Okay.
right? They don't have a brand and corporate message architecture that tells a holistic story across their capabilities, and then they don't ladder things up in a way that aligns. Um, and then the specific messaging around particular capabilities don't really wow the target audiences.
Mm.
They don't really resonate, and they don't really get those target audiences to the actions that the companies want them to take, ultimately buying or using or doing whatever it is they want. Um, that's the number one thing I see a lot. The second thing is just general thinking, right? So I see a lot of executives that are kind of they have their own mindsets of what work or what doesn't work,
Sure. Yeah.
and they get kind of married to that,
Yeah.
and then it doesn't work, and they double down on their mindset, or they put blame in the wrong place or something. I think that the companies and the executives that I've seen really do this well, Stratcom well, are the ones that are willing to involve me at the C-suite
Mm.
and bring me in and show me everything and allow me to really counsel them on business matters
Sure.
and basic decisions. And because there are communications permutations, this decision has this impact on this group of people, internally or externally, and we have to manage that. We have to think about the impacts of decisions on employees, target audiences, investors or owners or who name it, right? And then we have to manage that response and make sure that it aligns with what we want to strategically drive toward. And most executives just aren't wired to think that way.
Hmm.
They're not. Again, they're focused on product or service and finances. So, again, the companies that get it right and the execs that get it right are willing if they can't themselves think that way, to bring in people like me that can, and then let people like me help them make the best decisions for them and their companies.
Do you have any, just out of curiosity, do you have any like favorite, companies that you point to? If somebody comes up to you and they're like, Jason, who's somebody who is just nailing it and doing it right? Like, do you have maybe either whether it's a favorite client that you've worked with, or if you're looking at like another company just, in the world, who do you think is like executing at the best possible level right now?
Well, I have a couple of clients today that I think are really good at that. I've had clients in the past that I think have been really good at that.
Mm-hmm.
In the world at large, I'm not really close enough to it. I'm not in the room for all of those discussions, so it's
Sure.
hard for me to say. But I mean, a shout out to my current client, Apache Nugget Corporation. So
Okay.
they're a casino and hospitality company in the southwestern U.S., based mostly in New Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
And my client there is the CEO of the corporation, and I get a chance in working with them to advise him personally on a lot of stuff. And
Yeah.
he sees the value in having me at the table when relationships are being built with people all across the business, and in telling me things that are happening that matter to him personally as well as the company. And it's a wonderful position to be able to advise and work with somebody from. So thank you, Tony.
Shout out to Tony.
Hopefully a lot more of that to come. Yeah, that's been wonderful, right? There's a former client of mine named Zyratex.
Okay.
Try spelling that one without a without
Yeah.
a and so I love telling the story because it's just a real powerful indicator of the value of all of this.
Mm-hmm.
But they were a company that had built a billion dollar plus business off of the channel relationships that they had over 20, 30 years. And so you never would have heard their name before they hired me. You would definitely have known their clients, and they built their business kind of behind the scenes. But they made a strategic business decision at a very high level to acquire a business unit that had an actual product to sell to a market.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that was a fundamental shift for them as an organization, from a very channel focused model to more of a go to market to a market model, in a very competitive market landscape on top of that. Luckily for me, they brought me in on this. Like, here, we need help going to market.
Yeah.
Help us out. And with that, right, and my day-to-day contact was the head of marketing for the company, but I got to be at the C table and helping all of them talk through things. And um, we can talk more about the particular elements of strategic communication if you want, but over the course of 2 years and working with them, I had a chance to bring almost every element in
Yeah.
the suite, in the tool belt, to bear for them. And we were able to help them build a name for their company that resonated with target consumers, and then built messaging around the products that added value, that resonated.
Yeah.
We were able to help create a sales pipeline and help them sell and create sustainable revenue, and all of that. We were able to help them through a CEO change and another acquisition. We were able to help them activate events and get to know analysts and influencers in their space that opened doors for them, and navigated other challenges in the market from just a community and a public affairs perspective that impacted their business, and the whole nine, right? And that company acquired that business unit for $120 million
Wow.
just before they hired me. 2 years later, they spun off that company for $374 million.
Wow.
So that
That's
company made
awesome.
a $254 million profit
Mm-hmm.
in 2 years, Um, it's definitely not all due to me and my team, but I mean, absolutely, we had a massive impact on that.
Yeah.
And I'm very, very proud of that. And it was a sign of us doing the right things at the right times, but it also was them recognizing what they needed and what they didn't have at the table when they needed it, and them going and getting it and being willing to listen to people like me who had ideas for how to do things. And wow, it worked. So,
Yeah.
a great success story that I like to draw upon whenever I get the chance.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure that helps to kind of continue to speak to not only your continued success with Game Changer, but also, just kind of a nice anecdotal example of like, hey, this is the real world work that we are doing right now, right?
Yeah.
That story brought up two questions in my head, and I want to start with this one. So if my math is correct, you said you've been operating Game Changer for the last 12, 13 years. That takes us back to about 2013 or so, right?
Yeah.
Give or take 2013. So we
Yep.
have lived just the way that I think about content, right? We have lived through a pretty, in my opinion, monumental change on how probably how marketing is done, how content is formed, the importance of certain platforms. We went through whatever it was, 2, 3, 4 years of a global pandemic in that time, which probably changed a lot of businesses. But I want to focus just on the last 5 years or so. Let's take us back to maybe just before the pandemic happened. What's been the biggest shift that you've seen in how you're operating, or is there a big shift in how you've been operating over these last 5 years or so?
From a strategic mindset perspective, I don't think that's changed a lot.
Sure.
At the end of the day, my job is still to build, to help my clients build and grow and scale their businesses.
Hmm. Yeah.
And the nuts and bolts about how you do that haven't changed in 5 years. The the tactics sometimes in some ways have. And of course, right, with the internet, with social media, with digital media, with AI, with all these other things, right? There are more ways to do the work today than there have ever been, and there are more channels to reach people than there have ever been. And the landscape of communications channels is more fragmented than it's ever been, right? So
Okay.
you used to be able to, the gold standard of a media hit 20 years ago was the Oprah Winfrey show, right? Because if you
Sure.
got on there with whatever you were pitching, man, you had a captive audience, and Oprah's name herself carried with it.
It was
She made
huge.
companies, right? Um, Today, right? She's obviously not a thing anymore, or at least her show, but there are more cable networks, and there are more coming every day, right? And there are more social networks. Then there's more coming every month.
Yep.
And so audiences are more spread out. People are in they're in their places.
Hmm.
But as marketers and communicators, we still have to find them, and we still have to reach them with certain messaging and
Find them
get
where
them
they
to do
are.
what we want them to do.
Yeah.
So again, strategically, yeah, not a lot's changed, but tactically, how we reach people changes all the time.
Hmm.
And that's where people like me have to always be up on the latest technology. It doesn't necessarily rewrite the rule book. What it does do is it gives us more tools at our disposal or in our tool belt to reach people. And so, I mean, those are the big changes, right? It's the In the last 5 years, there's been a massive growth of especially digital
Yeah.
communications channels.
Yeah. Do you have any, just out of random curiosity, do you have any like favorite channels that have maybe come up over the last number of years where you're like, hey, I really think that this is a prime target that maybe companies need to focus on, or this is like definitely a space where companies should be putting their energy into at least a little bit?
Yeah, if you're a consumer company, I think it's really about Instagram these days.
Okay. Yeah.
If you're a B2B company, believe it or not, LinkedIn is where I see the best bang for buck these days. And there are others too, but LinkedIn is where everybody is. It's
Hmm.
where people are opting into communities. It's where um, there's so much good stuff out there, and there's, I mean, if you can build good community on LinkedIn, you can really develop some really powerful assets.
It seems like to me, and this is just my own observation, that when LinkedIn got acquired by Microsoft, I can't even remember how many years ago that was. It feels like it was like 5 or 6 years ago before the pandemic, but I could be wrong. Somebody can fact check me on that. But it seems like just over the last maybe year and a half to 2 years, give or take, LinkedIn has really taken off with its discoverability of different communities, its algorithm in terms of what information it's showing you, the types of information that it's showing you. I mean, I'm starting to see short form content, like video content, pop up on LinkedIn now,
Yeah.
which was like never a thing,
Well,
just
and
a
the way
couple
their
years ago.
algorithm is structured, Chris, the video really performs well.
It does,
So
yeah.
if anybody's been on my LinkedIn in the last month or two, right, I have started to do more video
Hmm.
because I'm seeing it perform 2 to 3x better than the rest of my stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that that's pretty true across the board. So, shocker, people like video. I don't think that I'm not going out on a
Nope.
large limb on that one, but it just underscores the importance of it, right?
Hmm. And I think that that also leans into the former one where you were talking about B2C companies where Instagram is coming into play a lot, and why Instagram has leaned so heavily into reels and videos and things of that nature, because they're short, they're snappy, they're as long as the message is correct, right? They're doing the effective communication thing.
Yeah.
If they can hook somebody in the first couple of seconds, like you've got them, and you've got probably a higher likelihood of either selling them on something or at least like checking a product out or a service out a little bit more than if it's a bad message and they're just scrolling along. Because the attention span nowadays of probably the consumer market is probably way shorter, depending on who the audience is, of course.
No, there's no question. I don't think it matters much who the audience is. We have to catch people quicker and more powerfully than we've ever had to before,
Hmm.
which again, only to me underscores the need for really good messaging.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, if you don't have a sharp message that you're really confident will resonate, you're going to lose. And your competitors will lap you and you're going to be behind. It's just the fact of the matter, no matter what game you're in these days.
The other question that I had, though, kind of going back to the story that you told here, was you mentioned the ability with the company, and forgive me, I forget the name, but you mentioned the ability to build a sales pipeline through the effective communication. Now, you were in the room at the table with the C level folks, right? You were kind of helping to build this whole thing up, and with a product that was actually going to market. My question, though, is you build an effective communication strategy, right? You build up the value. Where do things then bleed over into the sales side of things? What's the importance of drawing that line between marketing communications and then the sales side to eventually propel this whole thing forward?
Yeah, this is something I'm also very passionate about because in most organizations, marketing and sales are kind of church and state, right? They're so
Okay.
separate and they're siloed and they don't talk to each other very well.
Yep.
But I believe pretty strongly that the more integrated those two are, the better off you're going to be. And here's why, right? So, and this particular company and client is a really good success story of that. And my corporate experience is too. But I have seen, so kind of starting from the beginning. So if you've crafted a good message, right? In anybody like me is all about content, and we're always producing content. We're always trying to tell our story in a delivery mechanism that is going to resonate with the broadest people the biggest way, all of that stuff.
Mm.
And whether it be video, whether it be a case study or some other written assets or who knows, right? And to me, um, there is no better source of real information about how a product is performing, or how a product is doing, or how a product is selling, or how a product is doing, 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 or or what the client is thinking or any of that kind of real world everyday stuff than the people on the front lines.
Mhm.
And who is on the front lines in any organization every day? It's the sales team.
Yep.
Okay. So, and they are directly responsible and they are paid based on how strong those relationships are and how good the feedback loops are between them. So, in organizations that I've been in and clients I still have, I work to build those bridges. And I will convince marketing and sales leaders, mostly sales leaders, that I need to, or my team needs to be in the room when QBRs are happening or sales kick
Mm.
or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So this is something I started doing back at FICO, believe it or not. So I ran North American PR at FICO for 2 years. And um, I started to get on the calendar. So whenever there was a QBR, wherever it was around North America, I would go and I would talk to every single salesperson there over the 2 to 3 days that the event was happening.
Mhm.
And I would ask them questions like, who are your biggest clients? What problems do they have with business as a whole?
Yeah.
What are we selling into them? How is it performing? How is it, is it good? Is it bad? Are we learning anything? What problems or what are we making better for them?
Mhm.
What are we solving? What's their ROI? What are the actual numbers that we can show and that are defensible about how we're performing in their environment?
Mhm.
Um, and more, right? But I'm trying to gather feedback from the very front line. And with that information, several things can happen. Number one, I become a really value add resource across the entire business that I work in,
Yeah.
right? I can funnel that information to executive management. I can funnel that to the engineering team as they're trying to figure out what version 2.0 looks like. Well, here are some problems that customer XYZ are having. Maybe you should be thinking about a feature set that addresses these things. Or, who knows, right? So I can be a conduit of information across the organization. Number two, I can also build content that nails all of that stuff right on the head. So if I can figure, we are really solving for this particular value proposition, and we are this much better than the competition, and we can prove it with a defensible number.
Mhm.
I build content that tells that very, very, very clearly. And then, of course, because we know who our audience is, I can equip that sales team to use that content as a sales mechanism. So believe it or not, as this process went on, within 1 to 2 QBRs, and the sales team was getting from it pieces from me, content from me and my team that they were actually using. It was helping them sell. It was progressing deals through the funnel because, shocker, we had content that spoke exactly to what they were feeling for pain points
Mhm.
and help them solve their problem and articulate the value. So as sales found out, wow, this content is really helping me, and salespeople are motivated by sales,
Mhm.
right? Ink on paper. If they could see that I'm helping them generate more ink on paper, guess what? When I go to their next QBR, they're going to search me out. I'm not going to have to go bang down their door. They get the value that I bring to them and that other communicators bring, which only creates more content, which only creates more cross functional internal correspondence,
Yeah.
which only makes the whole business better.
Yeah.
And so it becomes the best kind of vicious cycle. And so these sorts of it's a long story, but how do you enable sales? Well, you publish it, you get the information from them that helps you help them,
Mhm.
and then you continue to be a team player. And then also you can devise other top or middle funnel or whatever it is. I've been able to build programs too that have helped produce content for certain pieces of a funnel aimed at a certain type of target buyer that helps move people through and helps a company convert more efficiently. It's a
Yeah.
slightly different challenge, but it's a similar type of strategy.
I'm curious. because you've been doing this for so long, and kind of like you mentioned earlier, right? There's no change in the foundational approach of what you have to do, right? You have to create an effective communication strategy, to push X, Y, and Z forward for whatever business that it is that you're working with. The mediums maybe have changed, or the channels and places that people are maybe have changed. But what I'm curious to know is, in kind of the ever-changing world of where mediums are, and just kind of understanding how people are using effective communication strategies and stuff like that, how are you continuing to kind of like maybe stay inspired, or to evolve your strategies, or to just like stay on top of your game? Again, no pun intended here, but how are you trying to stay on top of your game, as somebody who's leading an organization and trusted by other companies to help lead theirs?
Yeah, for me, it's so most of I believe 1000% in professional development, and I think that if you're not growing, you're dying. And for me, the I invest in kind of two main arms of that. The first is a peer group, at least local here to Minneapolis, St. Paul, called Coalition 9, where I mean, I'm a part of a group of 9, and we talk about all sorts of things on a monthly basis. But I also have access to the entire group of 300 to 400 several times a year. So I'm in any given time, I'm networking with other people in similar phases of business like mine,
I love that.
and other types of businesses that are like my clients. So I'm able to throw things on the wall and see if they stick, and I'm able to get counsel about trying new things. It's a really value added resource for me. The second thing that I love is my trade organization. So in our world, the biggest and most influential trade organization for professional communicators is the Public Relations Society of America. And I am blessed enough to be on the national board of directors.
Oh,
So,
wow.
worldwide, we have 24,000 professional and student members, and I'm one of 17 that has a vote on on the future of our industry
Yeah.
and the future of our society. And from that, so I've been in some sort of a leadership position in PRSA for 20 years, locally, regionally, and now nationally. And along the way, like we even had a board meeting in New York City 2 weeks ago, and we were presented. We had 3 or 4 different presentations in one day about future trends and this, and we went and spent an evening in the Museum of Public Relations in New York, where I was able to get regrounded in where we've been and why we're even in existence. And it's stuff like that that keeps me fresh and keeps me energized, right?
Yeah.
I love serving, period. I love serving my community. I love serving my profession. I love helping people get where they're going, and that fills my cup, but it also keeps me sharp and up on the latest trends. And so, yeah, I'm always a big fan of professional organization involvements, and that's part of why.
Yeah, always plugged in. No, that's I mean, for any profession that's out there, I think that's super important. But it seems like, just with the breadth of what you do and the resources that you have, right? You've got a good community of folks in Marcom that are very, very plugged in, and continue to stay on top of things. So no, that's awesome. Well, I know we're coming up on time here, Jason, and honestly, I could continue this conversation for hours because I'm at heart I'm a salesperson. That's where I got my humble beginnings, but I also have I've taken a pretty deep dive into content and that side of marketing and video production and things of that nature, and how to try to effectively communicate there. So I could geek out about this stuff as I'm sure that you could too. But
We can do it again another day if it really works.
We'll do like a reunion tour, right?
Yeah.
We'll have to come back together for sure and maybe see if things change in 6 months. Who knows? But I do kind of want to ask one final question. This is what I ask of all of my guests here. If somebody approaches you, Jason, and has wants to get into what you do, or, if you have kind of like a sage piece of advice for anybody who's wanting to go down maybe the same path that you are, whether it's just being in marketing or kind of the entrepreneurial path of starting their own organization, what's kind of like the one piece of advice that you might give out?
Again, I could answer that 50 different ways, but the one thing that jumps right to the top of my mind is just do the work, right?
Okay. Yeah.
People are coming out of school, college or high school, and they think they might want to try certain things. And they ask me, what do I do? How do I get started? And I said, just do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are hundreds, if not thousands, of nonprofits out there who would just if you called them up or you showed up at their door and you said, "Let me help you," like they'll literally hand you a stack and say, "Here you go."
Yep.
And you might not get paid a lot, but boy, are you going to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And before long, you're going to you will have earned your value place at that table. And Lord knows what what that will lead to, what doors are going to open, right?
Yeah.
Do the work. There's no shortcut for doing the work in this business, in any business, I think, but there's no shortcut for showing up. You have to show up. You have to be present, and you have to do the work. And this is not easy.
Yeah.
This is not easy at all. But you're sure as hell never going to get anywhere if you don't show up every day and do the work. If you're expecting a shortcut, if you're expecting an easier way, you're going to be sorely disappointed.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's sometimes, people are like, wow, well, that's really encouraging. And I'm like, sorry, man.
It's a simple message, right? It's super
Yeah.
simple. It's shout out to Nike, just do it. But it's super simple, and just like you said, you can take that in any industry. But I've heard similar advice from folks in kind of like similar industries where it's very much like, you could walk down to a local business, you could go down to a local nonprofit and just say, hey, I want to help you guys out. Or, hey, here's what I think I can do for your strategy. Or here, hey, this is what I'd like to learn. How can I be of assistance for what you're doing here? I mean, I could think of a ton of local coffee shops in my area. I could think of a ton of
Yep.
just local businesses that are starting up in my area. And
Yep. Yep.
I think that's huge.
People always ask me, what skills are you looking for in your number two or your next hire or something?
Yeah.
And by and large, table stakes are the basic skills of being a marketer or a communicator. But what I really want is somebody who is curious and who takes initiative and who knows how to ask good questions. And what better way to show somebody that you take some initiative and that you are curious than to volunteer for something? I
Mm-hmm.
love seeing that. And I don't know. Again, I'm getting a little preachy now, but it's a soapbox of mine. But it just there if you're willing to roll up your sleeves and do the work at any stage of your life or career, good things are going to happen.
I love it. I love it. And I think that's a good place to kind of wrap things up here and sign off. Like I said, I could geek out about this stuff all day. So we'll definitely have to do a reunion tour here in a couple of months, Jason. But thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. Hopefully, I know I learned a lot, and hopefully all the listeners or watchers out there learned a lot as well. So, Jason, we're going to go ahead, and leave all your contact information, or at least like your LinkedIn and stuff like that down in the profile. But is LinkedIn a good place to get a hold of you? Do you have any preferences on, if somebody wants to say, hey, Jason, I want to learn more, what's best way to reach you?
Yeah, LinkedIn works for sure. So I encourage people to call me 612-327-1886.
Boom.
And encourage them to visit www.gamechangercommunications.com. And you can shoot me a note through that, or you can just hit me up at info@gamechangercommunications.com.
Perfect.
LinkedIn, yeah, all of those are good ways to reach out. So absolutely, if anyone out there's reading or watching or listening and have a question about something or think I can help with anything, whether we work together or not, I encourage you to do so. Would love to hear from you.
Awesome. Well, Jason, thanks so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Look forward to doing it again soon.
You got it. Shout out once again to Jason for spending some time with us for this fireside chat. If you have a favorite part that you enjoyed, feel free to leave a comment down below and let us know your thoughts on this chat with Jason. Be sure to like the video, consider hitting the subscribe button, and turn on notifications so you can be alerted when future chats go live on our channel. Thanks for listening, and as always, happy hunting.